Some podcasts said the Flyers couldn't go on the road and walk away with 7 out of 8 points. That was not this show. We called it all along. Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, the Prognosticators Podcast. Anthony SanFilippo is here. You can find him on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. I'm Russ at Joy on Broad. Of course, we are being somewhat facetious in this. We did not see 7 out of 8 points on a road trip, but you bet your bottom dollar we're going to say that we did. So, Anthony, a lot to unpack, and of course, not only the road trip, but the Flyers falling behind, well, getting out to an early lead last night. We're recording this on Friday evening. So they get up 2-0 in a game last night. They fall behind, give up 4 consecutive goals, and then roar on back in overtime. So I want to get to that, and of course, what that means going forward. And of course, things from around the league, including Joel Quenneville getting sacked by the Chicago Blackhawks, who, oddly enough, are going to be playing against our Flyers on Saturday afternoon. So, Anthony, what are you thinking so far? How are you feeling? And are you buying the hype right now?
I'll take the last question first, which reminds me of the movie Quiz Show. Right? Do you ever see the Quiz Show? Did you ever see that movie? It's a great movie. It's a really, really good movie. It's about the game shows that were fixed on TV back in the 1950s, and the guy who and the investigator who brought them down. I forget if it was I think it was CBS, maybe it was NBC. I forget what network it was, but they were fixing game shows in the 50s. It was great. It's a really good movie. But anyway, the game that they're playing.
Accusing the National Hockey League of fixing games for the Philadelphia Flyers?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Dave Hackstall's job? Is that what's happening here?
No, my suggestion is that they would ask those trivia questions back then in multiple parts, and the guy would always say, "I'll take the last part first." So that's how they answered his question. I'll take the last part first. No, I am not buying the current winning streak, if that's what you want to call it. I guess it's a winning streak. There was an
overtime loss. But realistically, it's
what,
nine out of...
It's a point streak.
9 out of 10 points.
Yeah.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's borderline elite, Anthony.
Yeah, 9 out.
Call it like it is. There you go. That is elite production by an NHL squad if I've ever seen it.
5 straight games with at least 1 point. 4 of them are victories. If you break it down, really, the last 2 were not pretty at all. I thought that they played well early in the road trip. It slowly got worse. The first 2 games of the trip were great. We talked about them on the last Snow the Goalie. Then they played an okay game against San Jose, but the Sharks are just a much better team. And the Sharks win that in overtime. Flyers won the game in Arizona on Monday. Was not a good game at all. It was just kind of a bad game all the way around. Flyers were actually able to take advantage of their power play in that game and scored against Arizona's penalty kill, which is the best in hockey. I mean, they're killing at 91%, which is really high. I mean, that's got to come down a little.
What's their percentage again?
Penalty kill? I think it's 91. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Wow.
I said that out loud.
Is 91 good? Because I can't help but notice that at least early in the game last night, the Flyers, by virtue of giving up a power play goal while on the PK. Obviously, that's how these things work. In their 9th consecutive game, the Flyers' PK percentage fell to 67.9%, which became the all-time worst penalty kill in NHL history. And one has to sit back and say, wow, I thought it was bad. Maybe we thought people were being hyperbolic and saying it was one of the worst of all time, but mathematically, at least through 2 periods last night, it was the worst penalty kill percentage in NHL history since they started tracking the stat in the 70s. This is alarming to say the least, although I guess the best way to fight back on that, if you want to defend it, is Ian LaPerriere took a puck to the face while the Flyers were beating the Devils in the playoffs in 2012, and that obviously makes him not only a good penalty kill coach, but perhaps the best in the game for the other team.
Are you done?
Your thoughts, 610-632.
No, so anyway, they killed the second penalty, and they're now the 3rd worst in history at 68.4, ahead of those 79-80 Kings. And the Ottawa Senators of this season, you can check out their Uber video to see how they think about their penalty kill. They're down to 67.3 after last night. So Anyway, yeah. So I mean, yeah, the Flyers, worry a little. Arizona is 91.1%, by the way, on the penalty kill, number one in hockey, which is really high. I mean, usually you want your PK to someone be around 85%. That's really good. 91.1 is really high. Then last night's game, it really wasn't about special teams production. Even though the Flyers did give up the one goal on a power play, marking 9 straight games that they have allowed a power play goal. Fourth longest streak in franchise history. The record is 12. But it's the first time it's been this long since 2005-06, back in the days of Mike Rathje and Darian Hatcher.
Those are some good days.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Hey,
I call them the halcyon days in my story. After the game last night.
You're so upsetting sometimes.
Yeah.
I will not let you besmirch the good name of Mike Rathje on this podcast.
Why? Because he was a Name That Flyer guy earlier.
He was. So I am very defensive of that man. See, defensive of the defenseman.
Yeah.
See that? Yeah.
But the Flyers gave up 2 shorthanded goals in the game last night, which was awful, and they were on the same penalty. Which only the third
15 seconds apart.
Yeah, only the third time in franchise history that's happened. And they got the 2-0 lead. They give up the power play goal was the killer because that swung momentum. Arizona, the Flyers looked like they were just going to dominate the game. Arizona gets the power play goal with Wayne Simmons in the box and makes it 2-1. And from that point through the end of and that was I don't know how much time. It was 12 minutes ago in the first period when that happened. 13 minutes ago in the first period. From that point through the end of the second period, it was all Arizona. They scored 4 unanswered goals, 2 of them shorthanded. They now have 9 shorthanded goals, by the way, which is what the best teams in hockey usually have at the end of the year. They have 9 by November 8th, which was crazy. And then they went up 4-2. Flyers Hackstall calls timeout, makes a goalie change, and the Flyers play a pretty strong third period to tie the game. Dale Weiss Lightning, as your story reads on Crossing Broad today.
Go Weiss Lightning, you're running up the hood, Weiss Lightning, oh Weiss Lightning.
Look at you with the musical reference there. You'd think that would be me with the musicals. No, it's you. And then of course Shane Gostisbehere, who had a crazy game yesterday, got into a little bit of a shouting match with the linesman for interfering with him on what turned out to be the first of those 2 shorthanded goals.
Great check. It was a great check by the linesman, in fairness, against the boards. That was pretty impressive.
Gostisbehere gets the game winner in overtime on the only good play of the night by Jake Voracek, who I was sitting there with you and on one side and Bill Meltzer on the other. And Bill and I were talking at one point about just how poor of a game Voracek had played. And then he comes into overtime and he's got incredible jump. He gets that great first shot, out muscles 2 different Coyotes to get the puck back, and then makes a great feed to an open Gostisbehere for the shot that wins the game. So, look, you don't ever really complain when a team goes 4-0-1 over a course of 5 games in the NHL. It's not easy to do, okay? But good on the Flyers for doing that, kind of saving their early season woes. Got back to, I say 500, but above 500 points percentage-wise. They've played 16 games, won 8. That's why I say it's 500. But points percentage-wise, they're above 500. And that's great. And that's all well and good. But that's all that they are, Russ. And that's why I'm not buying it, right? That's why I'm not buying what we're seeing here, saying, "Oh my God, everything's fantastic." Again, they've righted the ship, because this is what they have been under Dave Hackstall. This is what they are under Dave Hackstall, and I'm pretty confident when I say, if he remains the coach long term, this is what they will continue to be under Dave Hackstall. An okay team who can ramp it up to a good level on some nights and win games, pull them out of their rear end, and then frustrate the hell out of you on other nights. That they are that inconsistent and that uncertain, and I think that's basically what the Flyers are. You look at the Flyers, keep saying they're looking for an identity. I think we know what their identity is. Their identity is this: they are just a mediocre hockey team. That's their identity.
They're a mediocre team in a mildly popular sport in a town where they have become forgotten. And it sounds really harsh to say it that way, but it's not inaccurate. I said to you last night when we were doing the Press Row show, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are subscribed to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, you should go check out the Press Row show, the only Flyers intermission and pregame show live from Press Row at Wells Fargo Center at all games.
For once, you're being honest with people. Yes, it is the only Press Row show. It is the only one. No one else is doing it.
And if anybody else does, they're all frauds.
They'll be copycats.
Stolen the idea. There will be copycats, and it won't be good.
No, but in all honesty, we had great numbers. We only last night's game was only the second time we've done that, Russ.
Yep.
And between our Facebook views on the Crossing Broad Facebook page and those people who tuned in on Periscope on my Twitter account, we had over 3,500 people check out the Press Row show either pregame or during first or second intermission, which is an awesome number considering it's only the second time we've done it and with not a lot of promotion. We've done a little bit of promotion, but not a lot of promotion with it. So I have a feeling it's only going to get bigger and bigger, and I think that's pretty cool.
I agree. So, again, if you're listening to the show, you didn't know about it, we do it on Facebook Live on the Crossing Broad page. So if you're not following it, go follow that. And Anthony's Twitter, which, of course, is always linked in every description of every episode that goes out through whatever podcast app at SanFilippo via Periscope. So the one nice thing, I think the thing that obviously separates it from pretty much every other show that happens that I guess is, on TV or on radio is we are constantly checking both of those outlets for questions, comments, concerns from each and every fan. I think for the most part, we hit everybody's question or reflect on everyone's comments. So make sure you go check it out. It has been funny though to see some of the side eye that we've gotten from some people, not immediately around us. I think it's a little bit farther down the row. But it has been interesting. You can tell originally people were like, what is happening over there? Why is there a microphone? And then pretty soon, couple guys go through in the background and they're like, wait a second, why are they filming? And then, it's been fun. It's actually been kind of comical. So I'm actually looking forward to, I won't name names, but some people who I don't think are going to be the most technologically illiterate people in the world trying to figure out how to do live streaming of any sort. So I think it's going to be cute. I think it'll be kind of fun.
But anyway, now that we got that nice promotion out of the way.
Press Row show.
Yeah, Press Row show.
Trademark it.
Yes. The thing you wanted to talk about, though, was, the forgotten team.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
In the building. So go right ahead. Because I got something for you that you probably didn't know because you were, busy at your number one job all day.
Yeah. Okay. So to me, where the Flyers are at right now as a team, and this is something we talked about last week. It's something we've talked about on the Press Row show. But I think the biggest issue with this team is the Flyers have gotten forgotten to a point where they've blown an opportunity. Now, the Phillies didn't exactly give a lot of lead in, nor did the Union. You think about how teams feed off each other. There should have, in theory, been a huge surge for the Phillies and the Union after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I think we saw it to some extent at the end of the Sixers season. You would hope that throughout the summer, you might be able to get a little bit of momentum going from some of these teams, knowing the Flyers were going to come back and that the Sixers were going to come back, especially knowing that the Phillies, it looked like they might be in a challenge for a playoff spot late in the season before it all kind of fell apart. The Union ended up actually making the playoffs, but they're not going to drive a lot of people, although I do know a lot of people who are both Union and Flyers fans, which kind of goes to a larger point. It was kind of almost like having a bad lead-in on TV, right? Or even in radio. You think about guys in a midday show could get axed, or if the morning show isn't very effective, or the same thing can happen in an afternoon show if the midday show isn't pulling enough ratings. So I find the Flyers right now, because they haven't put up good numbers on national TV especially, and again, you go back to the 8-2 loss to San Jose in the home opener, people who are fringe fans or who just say, all right, you know what, the Sixers aren't on, like, why don't I just check and see? Like, I don't really like hockey all that much, but, like, maybe the Flyers will be better this year. Like, that's fine. You typically, even people who don't like the Flyers, they know who Giroux is. They might know who Gostisbehere is or know that he's called Ghost Bear or whatever. But, because they haven't done a good enough job of capturing the hearts and imaginations of the Delaware Valley when they have been on national TV, I think they're kind of falling into this fringe category where I really do equate the Flyers to being more of a Union than I do to them being more of a Phillies. The Sixers to me are the team that people in this time of year really care about. The Eagles are their own beast, so let's kind of put that off to the side. But the Sixers are like the hot team, right? And they're playing mediocre as well, and for all different kinds of reasons that we won't get into on this show. But they're not playing out of their minds. In fact, they've regressed, but they're still getting good ratings and people are still excited about the team. It was kind of a similar way to like what happened with the Phillies this season, right? Like there was this hope, there was some promise, and obviously nobody thought that the Phillies were going to, challenge for a World Series or anything, but I think people were excited about it. They're the bigger, more mainstream team. Meanwhile, like the Union ended up having their best season in franchise history, but they're a fringe sport and nobody really seemed to care. I feel like that's kind of where the Flyers are at right now. You're not getting people down there. And again, like we've talked about this every time, I'll probably bring it up every single time this kind of discussion comes up, but the tickets are too expensive. And there are no people who are fringe fans who are looking at ticket prices, even like right before the game, saying, you know what, I'm willing to go down and spend $60 for an upper level ticket to go see this mediocre team play. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I will say to any of our listeners who are college students, I have a cousin who's a freshman at Drexel. He's on some kind of list, I guess, that the team has set up with college students. I think you have to use your college email, and they'll actually send you like last minute deals. He ended up meeting, which I don't remember which game it was. It wasn't the Islanders game. I think it was the one before it, where he got a lower level seat, like as a singleton for $20 front, like through the team. And that was pretty cool. So check that out, I guess, if you're in college. But I just kind of view this team as being this fringe team, and I think it's a shame. They haven't been able to capture the hearts and minds of fringe fans. And even to some extent, I think there's a lot of apathy that's been setting in. When you look at what happened last night where they gave up 4 consecutive goals, it wasn't even that the fans were booing them and like booing them off the ice. I mean, 20% of the seats at least are empty in those large blocks, which we've talked about in the past. That's just failure to either sell those tickets through via ticket brokers or whatever. You've got 80% left, and by the time the third goal went in, it was apathy. It wasn't even anger. And that to me is a bigger concern. So that was a lot of talking. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. And you need to. You don't come up for air very often. Sometimes I'm starting to notice this when you get into a a real good rant. You can go on and on and on. You don't stop, and that's okay. That's all right. I don't mind. I just sit here and listen to you, the dulcet tones of your voice. It's all
Thank
good,
you.
Russ.
Who was it, Miley Cyrus, that once said, "We can't stop and we won't stop"?
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
So far this season, the average Flyers game has filled slightly more than 19,100 seats, according to stats published by ESPN. That's actually good enough for 5th best in the league.
Yeah, right.
But it's still the lowest per game attendance for the Flyers. They say since at least 2000. And I would go further and say since the Wells Fargo Center's existence.
Are we saying 19,000 plus actual butts in seats or tickets bought?
Well, that's probably ticket sales.
Okay, yeah,
because it makes sense because
there's
the
not
average
19,000 people in there.
I think there are 19,600 seats or 19,700 seats, something along those lines. Actually, in the building that they count for a sellout, and then there are the excess in the club boxes, the suites, and the balcony suites that can push it over 20,000. For the count, but they only count, I think 19.7, I think is what they count for a sellout. So they're averaging 19.1. That will ESPN only goes back to 2000, 2001, but I can guarantee you that prior to 2000, the Wells Fargo Center was opened in the 95-96 season. But those 5 years prior to that place was full for Flyers games. There's no way they averaged less than 19.1 during those first 5 years. So this would be, and believe it or not, this is less than the 2006-07 season when they had the worst record in hockey. So they're so far now. Again, what have we had? 7, 8 home games so far. So it's not. There's still an opportunity. Second half of the year, they haven't played Pittsburgh. They haven't played the Rangers. They have teams that usually they sell out. Okay. So they haven't played some of those teams. Games later in the year that are more, have more meaning, always draw more fans as well. So this 19.1 is probably a little low, but you got to be seeing that there is, in the last 3 seasons, They were around. It looks like they don't have the exact numbers. They just have like a chart. This millennials love freaking visuals. Like
Oh, jeez. Are you seriously going to do this?
just give me the friggin'
Don't
numbers.
don't make this comment.
2016, 17 looks like it was around 19.7, 19.6 in that range. Last season was like 19.5, down a little bit.
There is no chance in this world that most of those home games that we've been at have had more than 16,000 people.
No, they have more
There's
than that.
no way.
Yeah, no, Russ, they do. They trust me on
Come
that
on.
number. Yeah, yeah. Even if it's 80, like you like to say 80% fill. I think it's a little bit more than that, but you say 80% filled. Even if it's 80% filled on 19,700 seats, what are you talking? You're still talking. You're still talking over
I'm gonna let
17,000.
you. I was gonna see. I was gonna see how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, that would be
80% of 20,000 would be 16,000.
yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. That's
So
what I
it's
said. There can't be more than that.
there is more than that.
No.
I can guarantee.
I'm gonna count every seat. Tomorrow I'm gonna go down there, and so help me, Anthony. I'm gonna take pictures. I'm gonna count every seat.
So just so you know, I'm in the process of doing working on a story about this, and I'm sure I will get actual raw figures of who actually comes through the turnstiles as opposed to tickets sold, because they are two different numbers. What is announced is always the tickets sold, um, because that's where the revenue is based. There is a revenue share in the NHL, and the revenue share is based off of your sales of your tickets. So that's why that's the number that's announced for attendance and not the actual turnstile number, which is always less than the number and it's for every sport, it's always less than what is announced. So yeah. So I mean, but there's no doubt. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that they're not drawing, that they're drawing better, as well as they usually do. They're not. They're not drawing well, at all. And I think it's fair to say that, this number is got to be concerning. And this is probably the thing when we talk about Dave Scott going and talking to Ron Hextall. That's probably what he's seeing and saying, "Well, we can't have this," because if you're averaging 19.1 this year, and last year you were averaging 19.5, that's 400 less people. Okay, at roughly $100 a ticket, right? Do the math. How much is that? 40 grand a night. Do that by 41 home games a year. How much money is that?
1.6.
1.6 million just in ticket sales. Now you're not even talking about concessions and novelties and stuff. So you're probably talking, close to $3 million, if not more.
Probably more, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have to. Well, I mean, it's not like it affects the team, but you got to think about that's a lot of money that facilities like Xfinity Live would also be benefiting from.
Sure, you're right.
Not only for the people who are going into the game who might want to pregame there or have a meal at one of the outlets there, but also just by virtue of like when a team gets hot, and we see this, it's more of a summer thing, but you have seen it in the past where people go down to Xfinity Live to go tailgate and then they go watch it there because they don't want to buy a ticket to the game. So yeah, like
Right.
all these facilities are losing out, and yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're just saying in the building, we're talking about a $3 million over the course of a full season drop off. That's pretty bad. And by the way, just so you know, in 2011-12, they averaged 20,400 people. So you're talking about in the span of the last 7 seasons that they're averaging 1,300 fans less per game.
4,000.
What's that?
In my numbers, 4,000. I'm holding firm to the 16,000.
Okay.
You will not talk me off this ledge.
Well, until I actually give you real numbers, and when I give you
Fake
real
news.
numbers,
Nope,
will be
news.
fake news. Okay. But
Who are you
yes,
going to get the numbers from? The team? Fake news.
no, I will see. I cannot divulge a lot of the information that where we glean things from. I cannot say, but I mean, like if you remember at the end of last season, I did a big thing on TV ratings, and it was a pretty huge story for Crossing Broad, and it was dead on accurate because I had insider information that most media don't normally get on total numbers and stuff. So I'm going to kind of use the same um, efforts to glean this information. Just I'm going to have to get it from a source within the Wells Fargo Center as opposed to the organization. That's the only difference. And I have people that I can get that information from. So um, fact is that this is a concern. This is definitely a concern, and it's you're right. It's apathy. It's because the team is kind of mediocre. The team is kind of just the same thing, and so when you see the same thing 3 straight seasons in a row, and the numbers of people who are coming out to the game are dwindling 3 straight seasons, and those TV ratings, while they didn't really drop, even though people said that they dropped, as I pointed out in the story at the end of last year, um, there were very, very minor drop offs off of television. And that could have been equated to obviously the Eagles' run to the Super Bowl, the Sixers being good again. They were not like precipitous drops, but they weren't improving by any stretch of the imagination. That, yeah, the Flyers are quickly becoming an afterthought in this city. And their solution this summer to rectify that was to create a mascot.
Yep.
I mean, seriously, I don't know how else to say it.
Create a mascot and bring home JVR.
Yeah, I mean, but that was it, and
now, did they have a more successful offseason than the Sixers did? Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously. I mean,
but the Sixers are selling out. Sixers are selling out every night.
Yeah,
should you go down there?
Probably not mediocre, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, even though they're off to a slow start, the Sixers, they're selling.
Yeah,
they're filling that building.
They are.
That's the difference because there's excitement there. There's an identity there. There's definitely one superstar, maybe two if Ben becomes whatever he thinks he should become.
Just shoot the ball.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference right now. So so the Flyers' solution was to get a mascot. I don't know.
It's on one hand it's good because it to some extent has kind of taken the a little bit of the spotlight off the players and off of how mediocre they've been. This last little streak notwithstanding, but no, I know what you're saying. Like it is a shame because like they continue to just miss out on it. Like I said, they miss out on an opportunity to seize at least a little bit of the market in this season. And I mean, with the Eagles, even though the Eagles are kind of meddling right now, right? Like they have a chance if they can put together a decent enough stretch to like maybe get people to say, all right, I'll watch a game. But again, like when the tickets cost what they do, you can't get fringe fans down there. Even, what we'd call the authentic fan, can't afford to go down and take their family down for a lower level seat for like $120 a pop, And so it's almost like the price of the game has driven people away, and the product on ice hasn't kept those who typically would stay. I mean, there have been people who have said to us on the Press Row show or have tweeted at me, and I would guess by virtue you, that like they have had season tickets and they have to consider, letting them go because the on ice product is not, up to the standard that they would want to see. And again, like that's why I say there's so much like the union, because these are a lot of the conversations that seem to be coming out of lifelong Flyers season ticket holders are very similar to what union season ticket holders have said. The product isn't good enough. Now, the difference here is the union tickets are very cheap. Like you can be a season ticket holder for 18 games for like $300. So it's never the tickets cost too much. But like the on-field, on-ice product just isn't up to snuff, and it doesn't look like they're ever really a contender in their conference. And like when you look at this Flyers team, okay, they create Gritty, or they find Gritty, right? He was found somewhere in Wells Fargo. They did construction and he just popped up. He's not actually a mascot. He's a real thing. So Gritty shows up, fine. JVR comes back. We haven't really seen much of JVR because of an early season injury. If JVR comes back, they make a trade here and there. They tweak it a little bit. Maybe they're able to get... Now, if on some off chance they're able to like swing a deal for Nylander, like that would be interesting. Eric Carlson, like if San Jose for some reason decides around the deadline that they're going to cut bait because they don't think he's going to resign, well, okay, then maybe if you're the Flyers and you can throw out a decent enough offer and bring him in, like it's not like these are going to really drive tickets from non-hockey fans. I don't think there's anybody who's really out there that could generate that kind of excitement in the city. There was a comment last night, and I don't remember who it was. I know we didn't address it, but it kind of stuck in my mind. Somebody had said at some point, it's not a matter of if Dave Haxtell is the right coach. It's a matter of having to go out and get that next face of the franchise in like Jack Hughes, with the implication that like the Flyers should maybe consider a tank. That if all they're going to be is a 500 team, and you know that with guys like Giroux and Voracek eating up, valuable cap space on this team, if the best this core can do is a 500 team, then like blow the thing up and start over. Now we've talked about this a bunch of times that in hockey it's not as easy as it is in basketball to go in the tank and get that impact player. Percentage wise, it's like the whole thing. Like it's still a lottery system at the top of the draft. So even if you end up with the worst record in hockey, you're not guaranteed to get it. So I don't know. I feel like for the fans who are hoping to see this team end up with a young superstar, I think it's fool's gold. Like, I think even if you manage to sell yourself on the idea that Ron Hextall, for some reason, would part with Dave Haxtell and just go with a stopgap coach for the rest of the season, I don't think this team is bad enough to go in the tank. So at that point, it's like, well, who do you trade? Like, you could trade away Voracek and try to get back some draft assets, maybe, but you need to make the salaries at least somewhat work. So unless you're getting an expiring deal back and a couple draft picks, is that really getting good value for Jake Voracek? You really think Claude Giroux is going to want to stick around for a total teardown and a couple more years to go back to, like, again, the typical Flyers thing, 2 years away from being 2 years away? Like, I don't see that. We know that they'll probably part with Wayne Simmons either at the deadline or at the end of the season. This team just, like, they're in that weird spot that the mid 2000s and like later 2000s Sixers were in. They're too good to be awful, and they're too bad to be elite. They're just this middle of the road franchise. And when, kind of to your point, when the biggest story to come out of this team so far this season has been the mascot, it's a problem.
It is, Russ, but I'll say this. When the Flyers were averaging over 20,000 fans in 2011-12, who was their superstar that was attracting the casual fan?
In 11? 10, 11?
11-12. That was the last time that they were. That was when they actually had their highest average, according to ESPN, when they had their highest average attendance at the game at the arenas. 2011-2012 season.
What year did Pronger get hurt?
That was the year he got hurt.
Okay.
But so he didn't really.
Well, there was some excitement about this young kid named Claude Giroux, who had stood up to Pronger allegedly in the locker room, and to see like what he would look like, and you still had Carter and Richards at that point, right? So, I mean, Carter and Richards weren't exactly guys that I think everybody were enamored with. I think people liked them more because they thought they were somewhat relatable with the old city escapades and going out and partying. I don't know. Like I guess those guys were stars, but like in the grand scheme of things in the city of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia sports Mount Rushmore of current day players, like I don't know, were either of those guys really on there?
No,
I don't know. Like
but
Giroux is now.
Yeah.
Was there anybody from that team? Like
I will say from that team is you had some more personality. Okay, that was a definite difference between what you had back then and what you have now. I mean, you had Pronger, although he did get hurt that year. You had Scott Hartnell. And I think that was the year Hartnell Down Foundation began, and that was kind of a fun thing to follow. You had Danny Briere, who was a lovable player, was great with the media, was always on camera, was a guy you kind of rooted for. And then you had those other players who were your star players, who may not have been big personalities, but they that whole old city thing. Really the first time that Flyers players partied in the city as opposed to partying in South Jersey. And so that could have, been an influx of, a following for lack of a better reason. That said, I don't see that huge of a difference. I I mean, there is a little bit of a difference, but not enough. That team won a round in the playoffs and then got bounced in the second round. And that was a great playoff series against the Penguins. That was the shift, Giroux, Peck and Crosby, whatever. This does not include play. This is regular season attendance. Um, so yeah, that was kind of a cool season. It was the last time they actually won a playoff round. Um, but they weren't much better than what you had, last year. I mean, they won a playoff round against Pittsburgh and then lost in the second round to New Jersey, a team that they probably were better than, but lost to them. And that was it. It was the last time they were in the second round. And attendance has been pretty down since then. So, I mean, I don't think it has anything to necessarily do with the talent, um, more so than it did, And I think there are other factors, and I think it's the mediocrity. I think that's what's really when you have what is this now? 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh. This is the seventh season since you won a playoff series. I think that has more to do with it than anything else. That's why tanking doesn't work to me for fans in any sport. Like, I know we bought into it a little bit here with the Sixers, but they're still, I mean, and that's going to be a vocal minority as far as I'm concerned. Ultimately, winning is what draws the attention of the fans. And if you sit there and say, well, we're going to give you a 5-year plan or a 7-year plan to finally get back to being respectable again, fans they're not going to buy into it until you're good again. They'll be like, okay, well, we'll see you in 7 years then. And that the Flyers are now into a seventh season since when they won a playoff game. Not to say the rebuild's only been part of the last 4, but nevertheless, they're 7 seasons without a playoff series victory. That's why nobody's coming to the games.
It's really sad. It's like painting such a sad picture, because there's really not a way to turn it around, at least in the immediate future, right? Oddly enough, I feel like one of the things that could have turned the tide for this team, and I wrote about this and we talked about it on the Press Row show, is the coaching situation. And I think we had talked about this off camera, but a guy like Peter Laviolette resonated so well with the fan base. He was the personification of how most Flyers fans felt at any given point of the game. If you just had a Laviolette cam the entire game, you could pretty much guess or predict that his mannerisms on the bench were pretty much what you and your significant other or family member sitting on the couch were doing, gyrating in the living room, right? And the one guy who's also very expressive and is also a bit of a hard ass who was available on the coaching market was Joel Quenneville. And by virtue of the Flyers, going off and winning 3 out of 4 games on that road trip, it clearly had to make those within the organization who might have thought that Dave Haxtell was on a little bit of thin ice have to kind of, put that off to the side for a bit. I think that was job preservation 101. And when we saw what happened last night when they went up 2-0, which is something they just haven't done in games this year going up. Now they did it on the West Coast trip and they managed to come out with a really hot start last night, but to then go up and give up 4 consecutive goals, I looked at you at one point and said, like, does this now get rid of any good feelings that were earned on that West Coast trip? Does that negate everything that was earned? And does it negate that feeling that you can't part with Haxtell at this point? And then, after the game, they end up winning. I think I said to you, like, if that game had gotten to 5, 6, even, God forbid, 7-2, like, I would definitely think that at that point, that makes everything from the West Coast trip go away. But I feel like Quenneville's a guy who, like, it's not like fans are going to dole out all this cash to go just watch Joel Quenneville on the bench. But I think to know that somebody who is proven as a coach in this league, who's won 3 Stanley Cups, I think that brings a certain legitimacy to your team that you don't have right now. And maybe part of that is because nobody seems to know who ownership is. It doesn't feel like there's any pressure coming from the top to apply pressure to the GM, to apply pressure to the coach. But man, if you get a guy like Quenneville in here, you can't say that the guy is a moron. You can't say that the guy is incompetent. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's saying that about Dave Haxtell, but there's certainly, I think, a greater number of people who think he doesn't know what he's doing versus like what some of the other coaches in the city are doing. Though, in fairness, I'm not just so sure about any coach in this city, and that includes the one who won a Super Bowl. I just merely point to 2 of his assistant coaches who we lost, and the offense hasn't looked the same this year, but whatever. I'm just an idiot. But I just kind of think like, look, at some point you have to go out and do something that gets you some legitimacy and kind of regains the trust of your fan base. And if we've learned that Dave Haxtell is merely a guy who can maybe push some of the right buttons, and again, we gave him credit on the press row show, we gave him a little bit of credit on this show last week. He has done a better job of putting young players in successful positions this season for the most part. Vorobiev notwithstanding, getting banished to the press box and then sent back down to the AHL. I think if all we're gonna see here is, like, I don't know how many of these guys have really gotten that much better and grown under his leadership, then at some point, like, don't you just say, like, look, this was a nice idea conceptually. He found success in college. It didn't really work out here. He's a middle of the road coach. He can't really motivate his team consistently to achieve the highest that the game offers. Like, don't you at some point just hand this thing over to a guy who has a proven track record? Now, obviously, that doesn't account for the guys who are in the locker room, their mental makeup. And there was a very interesting thing that you pulled from Haxtell's press conference that I think maybe speaks to why Quenneville might not be the best coach with this group. I'd love to have you elaborate on it and kind of explain to the fans why, the Quenneville, coming in as coach might not be such a resounding success as everyone would expect.
Well, it's not even that. So first, let me just say this. I think I would, if I was the general manager, I would seriously consider making this change at this point, because you don't just have an opportunity to get a coach who's won 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years and bring him in. He's there and he's available. And the guy that you have in place has done nothing more than get you to the playoffs twice in the past 3 years, and looks like this season he's going to be, in the kind of same spot again. Maybe not, get one of the last playoff spots. That said, I as much as I've not liked Haxtell's coaching, I don't think he's an idiot. I know a lot of fans do on Twitter. I don't think he's an idiot. I think that he's an okay coach, but you need better than okay.
Bingo. You don't have the star power to overcome that.
Right. But the interesting thing to me would be, if you, and this, you can learn a lot about your team. You can learn a lot about your players by making this change. Because if you make the change to Quenneville and Quenneville has success, it's a win-win situation. If you make the change to Quenneville and Quenneville has success, then you sit there and say, okay, well, this is a coach who knows how to make this group of guys win. If you make the change to Quenneville and he doesn't have success and it's the same thing, you have pretty much the same results as you were having with Haxtell, well, then it lets you know that there's a problem with the construction of the franchise. Okay? So this is, to me, I think that this is why Hextall would be a little bit reluctant to do it, because he looks at it and it says this could end up looking bad for him as the general manager. But if you're the CEO, if you're the owners of this team, and you look at it and say, okay, well, we've got better with a new coach. That's great. So the changing the coach was the right call. Or we didn't get better, and gee, what's wrong with our players? Where do we go from here? Is that a problem with the general manager? Maybe you think about making a change there. So it's almost like, Hextall is able to cover his ass by hoping against hope that Haxtell turns out to be the guy. If you show patience and give him a chance and let him coach for 5 seasons, of maybe eventually he'll get there, as opposed to switching to a guy who has a great track record, and then he comes in and he can't make it work either. Well, then what the hell's wrong with the players that you've put out there on the ice? Yeah. You can the first time out, you can blame the coach and say, look, I gave you the tools and you didn't succeed. But the second time out, if you have the coach again, now it's on the general manager if it's the same thing.
The Flyers are in that phase of their life between high school and college. Dave Haxtell is their high school girlfriend. And they're afraid to move on and just break up because they want the security. They know what they have, and it might not be the best. They don't really have much to compare it to, but they're afraid of making that change. And sometimes making the change, while it's scary, is the thing that ultimately leads you to success. And they are just afraid to pull that trigger. And there's no doubting it. Now, you and I might disagree. We talked about this last night. We might disagree about how close the team might have been to ending this coaching experiment if the road trip had gone poorly. But I think the fact that it sounds like some doubt had crept into the minds of people within the organization, and obviously Dave Scott showing up and, having previously seen Bobby Clark and lining up the time frame of when he said he would see Hextall next, I think it's pretty safe to say that like there was a real thought to these guys, having doubts about Hextall. And if you're that close where a West Coast swing could be the thing that ultimately decides his fate, I think that tells you that as an organization, you've already kind of moved on in your mind. And when you have such a great coaching candidate out there who's available and who, might be able to get more out of this, I think it's something that you have to do. I think the analogy I used last night was, sometimes you hear a coach say that they think they squeezed every bit of juice out of the team, right? To me, this isn't just about squeezing the juice out of the team. This is making use of all parts. This is like taking the orange and zesting it first and then using the juice, or a lemon if you prefer. This is taking the chicken, taking all the meat off, and then using the bones for stock. I don't think Hextall has that in him. I think he's a breast meat kind of guy. He discards the dark meat. He discards the bones. He doesn't make a stock. He's just trying to make do and like kind of cover up some of the flaws by presenting the best parts, and that's double shifting, the top talent. That's not running risks at times with some of his younger players. I just think he's risk averse, and I think the organization is as well. And at some point, Quenneville is going to sign with a team. And that actually comes to one of the questions or comments that we got on Twitter from Mike Aceto, who said, biggest fear is Flyers falter under Hack for the rest of the season, then fire him this summer, but by that time, Coach Q is off the market. Shouldn't Hextall be planning for a coaching upgrade if indeed Hack is likely out of here in the next year anyway? I think it's fair. I think it's a very fair question, and it's something that I would still guess is bouncing around the minds of some in Wells Fargo Center.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went to fan questions before you gave me another metaphor. Because that's what I was going to do. I was sitting here. I know we have a few fan questions that we wanted to get to, and I wanted to make sure that we got to them before you started talking about chili or tacos.
Well, you could do a brine. You could use some fruit to brine a turkey if you're looking for a citrus bird. So it is actually good, by the way. But continue.
Yeah. Anyway, but Mike Aceto's comment is a very fair comment, because you're right. I mean, what if you get to what if the Flyers team, and it's a good what if, because it's a realistic what if. What if they get to the end of the season and they're the same team they were at the end of the previous 3 seasons, which is what I think they're going to be.
Yep.
And the team decides at that point that, okay, we got to do something different, and they decide to go to a new coach at that point, and the guy you should have went out and got is no longer there.
Yep.
It's a great question. The contrarian devil's advocate could come back to Mike and say, well, maybe they remain patient and this guy gets this team going in the right direction, and the young players really step up. And once JVR gets back in there, now they're going to start scoring more goals. And hey, they've won 4 out of 5, they're 4-0-1, and they're going to start playing, 647 hockey the rest of the way. And they're going to be a team that nobody's going to want to play during the rest of the regular season and into the playoffs. They're going to be dangerous. You could be that too.
Yeah, but
you don't know.
There's just such a little chance. Think of it like this. I think for those who are still on the fence about, like, do you make a mid-season coaching change? This is the question to ask. Kind of to the point that you just made. Look at this roster top to bottom. Is there a scenario where this team becomes a top 2 team in the Eastern Conference, realistically?
No.
Without there being major injuries to multiple other teams?
No.
Then there is nothing wrong with making a change.
Correct.
Like, this isn't a scenario where you're sitting maybe the Sixers are a good comparison for this. You can look at the Sixers and say they're playing middle of the road ball right now, but it doesn't take that much to get them to be a top 2 team in their conference, right? This Flyers team doesn't have that. This Flyers team, probably with one trade here or there between now and the deadline, likely is not going to get up to one of those top 2 spots with this coach, with these players. And I think even with the trade, I don't see there being somebody available right now unless there is another team in this league who has a star who's regressed at least a little bit and they want to do like a like similar uh, salary swap with like a Voracek or something to see if maybe that can jumpstart things for their team. I just don't see a way to get this team to be a top 2 team in the conference. And at that point, it's just like, why not make the switch? I mean, are styles going to change? Yes. Is the coaching style, is the day-to-day operation going to change? Yes. And you had brought up a really good point last night that you've got 5 games in, was it 9 nights? It doesn't seem like a good time to make a coaching change. I would argue you could probably go with an interim coach for a few days there, make the hire, and begin to start implementing a system, and kind of making a transition to this. I don't know how exactly that looks. It's not the best time to make a move, but again, like, Quenneville's out there, and I don't think it's going to take long for him to find a new job. Now, maybe if he doesn't sign anywhere immediately, it's going to be because he simply wants to pick the right situation, and he's earned that right. But if I'm the Flyers, I have to make that call.
Well, so here's the thing, and I could say this for sure. Um, when you make a coaching change and you go to hire a new guy, it's not like you just suddenly call the guy up and say, all right, we want to hire you, and you work out a contract deal, and then you fire the coach and get the new guy in, and it happens in 24 hours. There is actually time that takes place in there, right? So if you're looking ahead and you say, well, when would be a good time to bring in a new coach? I would say to you that it would be after the November 27th game against Ottawa, which is, so you're basically looking at another 2.5 weeks. And in that 2.5 weeks, the Flyers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. Okay, 5 of which are at home, 6 of which are at home, and 2 road games, 1 in Buffalo, 1 in Toronto. So they're really not, they're not traveling far. They're pretty much locked into place and staying here. After the Ottawa game, they only have 2 games in the next 11 days. Okay, a road game in Pittsburgh and a home game against Columbus. There's a 3-day break and a 4-day break built into that before they embark on a long road trip in December. That would be the time. So if you're sitting there saying, okay, maybe you call Joel Quenneville and you say to him, okay, here's what we'd like to do. We're thinking about doing this. Are you okay waiting until the end of November? If he gives you, yeah, sure, no problem. His agent tells you, yeah, we'll hold off till the end of November. Then you just kind of start having those private discussions and figure it out, later in the month. However, if the team starts going on a roll, you don't make the change. If the team continues to be mediocre, then you make the change at that time. And I think that's a real conceivable approach. You can talk to the guy in advance.
It's a lot of games, man. That's a lot of games to sit on.
But here's the thing. No one else has fired their coach to hire Joel Quenneville yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay, so that's my point. So, like, if anyone was thinking along the lines of, let's do this right away, do it now, there might be teams who are thinking it. There might be a team who's already contacted him and they have something in mind. And it could be the LA Kings who are going to fire John Stevens, but they want to do it at the right time. Again, they might have, a spot in the schedule where it makes more sense. Whatever the case might. What's that?
John Stevens.
What?
He got fired 2 days ago.
Oh, yes. Not John Stevens. Who was the other one that was being considered being let go? Not L.A. Damn it. You're gonna make me look it up now.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw a wrench in that. It's just I forgot for a second because we talked about it last week. It's like, oh, John Stevens is probably on the hot seat, but yeah.
Yeah. No.
I mean, that spot's out there.
But the point is it takes time to fill the spot is what I was going for, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the thing. So it's the point of it is that it could be in the works, but I don't think it is, but it could be. And if it is, you got to look for a time where it makes the most sense, and that's when it makes the most sense when you get a break to get a new coach in. I mean, you could sit there and say maybe after this homestand, by the next Saturday. Then they have 3 days off before they play Buffalo.
That's when I
But it's
would do
also
it.
right before Thanksgiving, and you're probably not going to fire a guy right before the holiday, right?
He's still gonna make his money. He's not going into the poorhouse. This isn't
No,
like Ebenezer Scrooge making
I'm
the
just telling you. I'm just telling you how the NHL works.
yeah.
Just telling you how the NHL works. I mean, it's just the way things are
I
in
got it.
in
It's
this in
just
the sport. They
the
have a they
idea
have a
of
they have a trade freeze at the holidays in the
really
NHL. Yeah, yeah. You're not allowed to trade anybody right before Christmas.
that an official rule?
Yes, it's an official
That's an
rule.
official one. That's not just a gentleman's. Wow,
No, yeah,
I did not know that.
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's kind of crazy, you
Wow.
know. Yeah, yeah. No kidding. I was,
All right,
by the way,
let's
I was thinking of Todd McClellan in Edmonton.
got it. Yeah,
Is
that makes
who is
sense.
the other guy I was thinking about
Now, if
because
you're
they have a
Glenville, then
star
you can
player
you
and
can take
yeah,
over probably the best player, second best player in the league.
yeah,
That's not an
right.
unattractive situation. Two more.
And yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
have
have
two more comments. Go ahead.
two more comments, and then we have a 5-star review and an edition of Who's That Flyer, and
Okay.
we'll wrap from there. So,
Yep.
Darren Scott on Twitter. At DPS0616 says, wanted both of your thoughts on this. The play of Nolan Patrick has been really good lately, but the most impressive part of his game so far this season has been his back checking. I feel like he's constantly catching the puck carrier and stripping of possession.
Yeah.
We talked about this last night. Nolan Patrick has been a bright spot, was a bright spot on the West Coast trip, and I think even in the Islanders game, he was just a guy who looked like he wanted to will the team back into it, which is a good sign from a young player that a lot of people had high expectations for.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And Darren's got a good eye for that. I mean, it's something that's probably not been talked about a lot. Um, it might be worthy of a sidebar, Russ, as one of our future games here coming up. Um, Nolan's been really good. Really has been, and obviously he's produced offensively, but he's correct when he points out that Nolan is done a real nice job on the defensive side, and it's kind of I kind of worried a little bit with that second line because I didn't think that he was going to be as good as he's been playing defensively on that second line, playing with Voracek, and yeah, you have Lindblom, who is more defensively responsible, but he's not like a overwhelmingly defensively responsible guy. But I think that it's a good he's played really well. He's just played really well all around. He's been solid two-way hockey player for the Flyers to this point, and I think that if as do I ever think he's going to be a superstar? I don't, but do I think that he's going to be a legitimate, top six forward who's going to put up a good number of points and actually be responsible on his own end? I do. I do think he's going to be a good hockey player for a long period of time.
I know it might be a loser's way to look at it, but like again, you have to kind of remember that getting Nolan Patrick was pure luck. I mean, like to some extent, anything you get out of him is just gravy, right? Like
Yeah,
I know that like there are going to be high expectations because it was the second pick in the draft, but it wasn't a spot that they expected to be in, and they just so happened to, end up with a who I think for most of the time had been the consensus number one overall pick, and then some injuries cropped up, but he looks like he's healthy. And again, like seeing the fire, seeing him flying around on the ice has been encouraging.
yeah.
Last comment was by Steve Appleman at Snapple Apple. What do you guys think the Flyers' major problem is playing at home? I know they won last night, but they just can't seem to win a lot of big games at home and fold under the pressure. Is it the fans, or do they just like getting away from them?
So I kind of addressed this a little bit in my story after the game. Um, that and I didn't. You had asked me this previously, Russ, and I had said no way that they're bothered by the fans. Are you kidding me? These guys are professional athletes. They play in front of people screaming all the time. They just tune it out. There's no way that they hear this stuff. Well, it turns out I was wrong. The Flyers have rabbit ears, and if there was any doubt about that, is you just listen to the comment from last night when Dave Hackstall said in the was talking in the postgame press conference about what was going on during the timeout that he had called, and I thought that was a really interesting thing. And I said to you on the way back upstairs, back to the press box after the press conference, I said, you know what? That was maybe the most interesting thing that came out of this game is what he said. And he said during the timeout, he says, it's a matter of getting back together, getting your brain settled down, calm down, worry about the next shift. Don't worry about everything else going on the other side of the glass. We've had some struggles in this building, so get the focus on the ice. That's the only message. So that tells me that the coach called a timeout and basically told his team to stop worrying about the fans booing them.
Yeah.
And that blows my mind that that's a thing. That's even it's even a, like, how do you have those rabbit ears, man? I mean, you're a professional athlete getting paid handsomely to play a game, and you're going to sit there and be affected by some chucklehead screaming that you stink from the stands. Like, I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I don't
don't
know if
get
this
it.
is something where like you have to kind of question how the front office has been drafting guys. Like, is this a systematic issue? Like, is this systemic of what's gone on in drafting and acquiring these guys, or is it just a few key contributors? Like, these are all things that we don't know for sure. But yeah, it was a very telling answer, um, and I would say it's pretty disappointing. Real quick before we go on to our last couple things, I just wanted to say it was really refreshing last night. In a season that's been full of a lot of downs at home, especially as we've been down there covering the team, Dale Weiss last night was simply delightful. And I know that a lot of people have given Dale Weiss a hard time. I did at the end of last season. He's played a lot better this season. There is no doubt that Weiss and even Yori Laterra have played better in their given roles this season. Weiss was so refreshing in the locker room. There are guys, and it's pretty easy to figure out who they are. I think if you're a fan, there are guys who get called out pretty much every night to do media availability. They stand in front of the media corps. They don't say a whole lot. They talk. They don't say much. Weiss last night talked for nearly 9 minutes to media. In the time that he had talked to the full media scrum and then a sidebar that I was part of, two other player interviews had gone through in their entirety. I think it was Pickard and Elliott had gone through. And he was absolutely refreshing to hear because he was candid in his answers, and he's clearly a guy who was making the most of the opportunity to meet with the media and really be in front of the fans. And we know that, it's not so much getting the camera time, but I think being able to actually kind of put out there the way that he's been feeling as a player. And there was actually a very telling thing that Shane Gostisbehere said when he mentioned the fact that, Weiss has been kind of fighting he didn't say fighting some demons, but he said he was in a dark place where he didn't think he was going to play for the rest of the season. And, you look at it and you go back, and one of the questions that I had asked Weiss, because people were focused on like the specific move that he did, but, I asked him if was finding himself on that breakaway, on that beautiful pass from Ghost. It's not a spot that he finds himself in very often. And like, do you get nervous in that situation? You think kind of back to the, you listen to the fans booing and everything. The game had gotten away from the team, and then there he is on a breakaway with the game on his stick. And I said, is it, do you just kind of go back to being a kid and like kind of visualizing that part of the game? He said, yeah. Like at that point, you don't think of anything else. He's like, it's just like being a kid again. And you think of that scenario where you go down the ice and you have the chance to tie it up, and it's you versus the goalie, and you put it in. So I thought it was really cool. And this is like one of those things that I would love to get feedback from people who listen to the show. Are there people out there who would like to hear the unfiltered comments from the players? Because I could always edit those things in and drop them in the Snow the Goalie channel if people really wanted them. Maybe sometimes it's just like one really good clip. We don't always get a lot. Like I said, some of these guys, they meet with the media, they don't really say much at all. But when you get something like what Dale Weiss had, like I just thought it was so different from what we usually get from guys, even in sidebars. It was just really cool, really good insight
Yeah,
on his part.
yeah, and it's I'm glad that you say that, Russ, because um, there's a lot of people who argue like, well, why do you guys defend players like that? It's not that we defend them, because um, there are times when they deserve to be criticized, but you can't sit there and criticize these players day in, day out, and blame them for everything when it's just not fair. And then you get to know them as people, and you say, you know what, this freaking guy's out there busting his ass trying to make it as a bottom six forward in the National Hockey League, And that's his career, and every day his career is on the line. And we don't know, we have the luxury of sitting back and criticizing, but you sit there and try and put yourself into that mental position that this guy is in, that he is doing anything he possibly can to keep his career moving forward. And then he finally gets an opportunity, and he succeeds at it. Rather than sit there and berate the guy constantly, you sit there and say, well, let's look at it. Let's break it down. Let's figure out what his role is, and is he doing what he's being asked to do? And this season he certainly has. And then when he gets a good goal, yeah, you can joke about it. I joked about it last night. I said, Dale, we scored and I just died. We all laughed about it a little bit. It was his first goal in almost a year. That's fine, but it's good. It's at the same time, it's good for him. Good for him, because he's been working his tail off and playing some good hockey, and he was able to help the team get back into a game and win a game. That's good, and that's So you can joke about it all you want. It's nice to see. It's nice to see and understanding the human side of it.
And I would say it's also nice to see from some of the veteran leaders on the team who are the big points guys. I specifically think about Ghost mentioning how good it felt to see Weiss find success like that, especially because of what he's been through and how hard he's worked to try to get to a spot. It's funny. Two of the guys who I think we've gotten some of the best answers from this year are bottom six forwards in Jordan Wheel and Dale Weiss. So it is interesting. There's a part of you with the human aspect of this where you just kind of wish that these guys had the elite skills that some of the other players did, because they give such good responses and because they're very open about, in Weiss's case, it wasn't just about his own play, but it was about, being on the bench and kind of like taking a macro view of this team and the struggles they've had. He just gave some awesome responses. So, felt really good for him. We'll see how he carries that through. We had a 5-star iTunes review. Of course, if you're subscribed to the show or you're listening for the first time, head on over to Apple Podcasts or to iTunes, whatever device you have, and leave a 5-star rating, which is great, but also leave a review and give us some feedback. It's one of the best ways for us to interact with you. So Austin 19837 said, love the podcast. So refreshing. 5 stars. I gave you 5 stars because I basically listen to the podcast in XM radio all day. And from a local podcast, your podcast is so refreshing. Not like the other ones that are blogs and always screaming. It gets annoying, but love your insight of the years you've been around the team and love the in-game interviews and believe you're right above me at the games because I've been a season ticket holder for 13 years now. Keep up the good work and looking forward to more episodes in the future. Thumbs up emoji. So big thank you to Austin. And that's pretty cool. So yeah. Anthony, I do have a Who's That Flyer? And then,
here we go.
And then we'll wrap up. So you earlier referenced the 2011-2012 Flyers team. So that got me thinking about a player who I don't know you're going to be able to figure out right off the bat. This Flyers player had 7 points in 45 games played.
7 points. Oh, gosh. Okay.
That's all I'm giving you.
That's all. I get nothing else?
7 points, 45 games. There's one fact that if I give it to you, you are going to get it immediately. Do you want it or no?
I'm just 45 games in that season. All right, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Maybe that. So I don't want you to give me the one fact that would make it automatic. Okay. But maybe I can ask you a question that might help.
Socratic method. I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, get me a little bit closer to it. Did this guy? Was this guy? How about this? Was this guy a Flyers prospect, or was he brought in from another team?
Let me look. Hold on. I don't have the answer to that.
You don't know the answer, huh?
I guess he was. I think he was one of their prospects.
He was one of their,
they drafted him. Yeah, they drafted him. Yeah.
So he was drafted by the Flyers.
He was. So, if I give you the clue, you're going to get it immediately, I think. Do you want the clue? 2011, 2012 was the only season this man played in the NHL.
Oh, well, see, I was gonna guess somebody else. Now I'm not gonna guess the person I was gonna guess because I know the guy I was gonna guess played more than one season. I'll tell you who I was going to guess, and
Okay.
I know it's the wrong answer. I was going to guess Eric Gustafson.
That is incorrect.
Yeah.
And I avoided Gustafson because he came up in conversation between us, I think, at the game. So I
Okay.
didn't want to go with that. So no, it was not Gustafson.
Yeah. So somebody who only played. This was the only season he played in the NHL, and he played 45 games for them.
45 games, 7 points, a plus minus of +4. Averaged 16 minutes and 11 seconds on ice. His Corsi for percentage was 51.3%.
Okay, so if he played 16 minutes and only had 7 points, it means he has to be a defenseman.
He is.
Yeah, 'cause you wouldn't be playing 16 minutes a night and only get 7 points if you were a forward.
We're getting there.
Who the hell only played one season and was a Flyers prospect? Because I could have gone another direction too.
And who would that have been?
But again, it wouldn't have been a Flyers prospect. That's the
Who
reason.
was
I would
it?
have I would have guessed Andreas
Nope.
Lilia.
Nope.
Um,
Wow, I got a good one. This is a good one.
Jeez.
All right. This one will give it to you. You ready?
Go ahead.
He had a hyphenated name.
Hyphenated name. Oh, okay. I know it. Marc-Andre Bourdon.
That is correct. Marc-Andre Bourdon is this week's Who's That Flyer?
Yeah, it's a shame.
Course, he was drafted in the 3rd round, 67th overall in the 2008 NHL draft by your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers. And it was the only season he played in the NHL. He went on to play a couple more seasons for the Adirondack Phantoms.
Yeah,
And
he
the
had
Greenville. Yeah.
he had a real bad concussion, and real major problem coming back from the concussion. He also dealt with some other issues that were kind of related to depression from the concussion and what it was like to try and come back from that, and never could make it. But he was such a nice guy.
God, you had to end it on a negative note.
Yeah, well, I'm just telling you,
Why couldn't we just end with Marc-Andre Bourdon?
Yeah, he was a great guy, and he tried. The Flyers
he was
gave
a great
him.
guy. He was a great
So
guy.
here's the thing: like they honestly believed he was going to be a legit NHL defenseman. Like they thought he was a solid prospect for them, and they felt like he was going to make it into the NHL and have a lengthy career. And that concussion was so bad, and it really derailed him. It's funny, like that was the same year, I believe that was the same year Eric Wellwood had his nasty leg injury that ended his career. Now he's a junior hockey coach in the Canadian juniors, but yeah, I'm pretty certain that was the same season as Marc-Andre Bourdon's concussion. It was a bad year for them with injuries. That was when Pronger's career ended.
Oh my God! Okay, we're done. It's so sad.
That was
a lot of sadness.
That was a bad year. That was a real bad year.
So let's move on really quick. To everyone who listened, who checked into the Press Row Show, thanks for tuning in. Of course, anytime the Flyers play a home game, make sure you check out the Crossing Broad Facebook Live page and Anthony's Twitter @SanFilly via Periscope for the Press Row Show. I know that next week I'm going to be flying solo on Tuesday and Thursday night. I'll probably still do some version of it, and I'm sure that the games that I'm not there, you'll likely do the same thing via Periscope. So until we know for sure, let's just go with the assumption that if there is a Flyers home game, check the Facebook page for Crossing Broad or Anthony's Twitter feed, and check in for the Press Row Show. We'll be down there tomorrow for that, and they play at 1 o'clock, so we'll go live at 12:30, and then first and second intermission. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, send them to us there or tweet them at us, and we'll be more than happy to respond. As always, thanks for checking out Snow the Goalie, the Flyers podcast, the only Flyers podcast on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, which includes other shows such as Crossed Up, a Phillies podcast with Anthony and Bob, who you can find on Twitter @BW Crossing Broad. Crossing Broad FC dropped a new episode over the weekend. How about that? Look at you. No, it was midweek. Talking about the club seasons that have gone on so far in Champions League. So that's me and Phil Keidel, who you can find on Twitter @PhilKeidel, Keidel, not hard to spell. It's Phil Keidel. Crossing Broadcast. Kyle and I dropped a 2-hour episode on Monday where he detailed spending a night playing craps with Allen Iverson. Yes, that Allen Iverson. And of course, it's always Soccer in Philadelphia with Kevin Kincaid and Dave Zeitlin, who you can find on Twitter at Kevin_Kincaid and at Dave Zeitlin. If you haven't noticed this by now, every episode that goes up in the description, there are links to my Twitter and to Anthony's Twitter. You just click on those. That'll lead you right there, and you can just hit follow if you're not following us. And for the other shows, it'll redirect you straight to, I believe, their iTunes feed. If it takes you to Art19, it's very simple. You can actually find the subscribe buttons on each of those specific pages for iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts. So until next week, for Anthony, at AntSanPhilly, I'm Russ, at Joy on Broad. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you soon, I guess Saturday morning, on the Press Row Show, live from Press Row at the Wells Fargo Center.